So, AI is a great example of what happens when you get to the root causes of the world, the root truths of the world. You don't actually get to a right and a wrong. Somebody could look at AI and say it's wrong, and somebody could look at AI and say it's so right. And it isn't either. It's neither one of them because what happens with these root things, and what I discovered is in society, especially, there's about 20 main roots, or more, give or take, of the truths. Now, the truth doesn't have much to do about righteousness, and it doesn't have much to do about virtue or morals. It just has to do with a fundamental structure that exists as a base and sort of a cause and effect relay that causes ripple effects. And the ripple effects and how we perceive those things, that's what we sort of quantify. Is it good or bad for us? And depending on that, we decide whether or not it's good or bad. And so AI is another example of that. But there's so many elements to what's going on with AI in music. And so let's talk about the many ways it separates into different kinds of arguments that don't necessarily have to do with right or wrong, just things that will impact livelihoods of people based on the system, the way it's operating right now, versus how it may operate in the coming 10 years or whatever happens, with the system then. So, and the whole world is just in a monumental push to change many aspects of the system, especially to push towards digital. And it also has to do, that's another one of those things, digital or not digital, is it bad or good? It's not either. It's a dilemma. It's like male and female, one not good, one bad. It's a difference between the two, one going this way, one going that way, trying to parse the benefits and the drawbacks of either element. So that's this pushing everything towards AI and towards digital development. And so what we need to talk about with the music thing, getting back to that especially, is the argument really isn't whether or not a musician like myself can benefit from AI. And that's one way that people often start the conversation about what's going on with AI. That's not really the situation at play, because another way of looking at it is AI can create unique experiences for individual people, and it can do it very quickly, versus a composer creates a unique experience for the individual, but it's not personalized. And they could do that as well, but it wouldn't be on the fly within milliseconds. So the big thing that happens with AI is one of the interesting things is that you can make this adaptive quality for the purposes of personalization, which is kind of the whole point of the system, because they want to get the model of you and they want the AI to respond to you in ways that you will find either beneficial, or if they're using it maliciously, maybe something else. But the point is to map your preferences and your sort of attributes so that the AI can sort of have these models. And this is obviously just talking about one specific kind of AI in the terms of music. So when you go to a streaming platform, the algorithm, the AIs and all these things can come up with things, that can better suit your preferences, even if you want something that's going to randomly surprise you in ways you may not anticipate. These are things that can be dialed into AI based on what you sort of, respond with and how you interact with whatever you're doing to train the system. So that's one element that gets, mistaken for whether good or bad, or how it impacts musicians. Really doesn't have anything to do with the musician's creative process on their own. It has to do with a whole other set of capabilities that AI is able to do. And so that's one element where we're not talking about right or wrong anymore. We're just talking about different ways of delivering a product. So in talking about a product, AI is, on one element is designed because they want to basically make a cheaper product because it's the whole point of the corporate system. Cheaper, but, producing as good a quality, in some ways as the human, or as a benefit, as a tool to the human to also still produce, a less expensive employee or creator. So that's another element of this that's to be taken into consideration. Do artists need AI to compete or create? Absolutely not on any level. Because what happens is, in the world the way it's been working in a linear way, corporations sort of dictate the final product of the music or the albums or the projects. And so for the longest time, we don't even have control over any of it in the first place. And this has been 40 years plus. But some of it produces a really great result. And it definitely produces a sort of polished, ready to go product. Whereas a musician could take a very long time to get around to something because they're so busy being experimental and learning things about music, implementing them in later on, whenever they feel like it. So they're sort of working on the artist timeline. But this AI will be able to replicate all manner of things. It's like, as I try to come up with an idea, based on something that I think would be clever to have as a tool for right now, there's already like an AI that you can just like dial in some information and then it's going to put out whatever you need. And it's not even worrying about the steps part, which is where I was, sort of talking about this linear thing. It's just jumping right in and getting to the final product. So, I might think about, it'd be nice to have a DAW that produces, music as a steady stream, and then you can sort of turn the channels off and on. Whereas AI has already gone in another direction entirely to simplify the process of creation in some ways. So another element to this is the novelty factor. So if I can play, very quickly, that's what the whole point of the virtuosity of the musician is. If I can play very quickly, I have to have some sort of niche or clever signature that can make me stand apart and stand out and stand sort of as my own entity. Whereas if you have AI as your secret weapon for everything, then what happens is there's a loss of novelty. So, if we talk about like video production has been created for many years by incredible artists on all levels and all layers of the profession of film and development. And so now we come along to a new era where we're talking about TikTok. And TikTok goes to show that with the technology that's available, people being very talented, they can produce incredible things. And that's sort of what they've done is they've created this whole market of making everyone a star. But in doing that, we come around to the novelty problem again. Because they're never going to reach, notice how everybody looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger if they're male, but they're never going to reach what he did. And it's the same way with Michael Jackson. Even though they can create incredible technologies, the trick with what the old school artists did is that they had to do everything like the exhausting hard way and to learn the intricacies of songcraft and the craft of development, basically, the craft of development. And if you don't have to learn the craft of development, you're missing like a humongous, just blind spot in what your capabilities are. So, for instance, a DJ can produce a really awesome production, but if they have to go in and fine tune some chords or some, instrumentation arrangement, Well, they couldn't necessarily do that. However, the composer producer kind of person who had the craft work of the whole music theory thing going in their favor, the trial and error of it all, that takes decades to learn. They could do that kind of thing. So that's what we're kind of talking about, where there's a loss of some depth when you use these tools as a crutch. So that's just another layer to this. It's not necessarily a right or wrong thing. Now, but I come across in a totally different way, looking at this whole situation. Because we argue about things that, we would like to see as the foundations of society, where, like protecting copyright for musicians. Protecting copyright, protecting the craft, protecting the artisanship, the musicianship, protecting the talent, all these things. But the ecosystem is extremely toxic. So something has gone wrong aside from all the ideals of what we represented. And that's why a person like me, I come from another perspective entirely in thinking that copyright is completely obsolete. And it's not the artist that's obsolete, it's the copyright system. And so people really don't like this train of thought, because what happens here is we reduce the middleman issue when we do this. When we eliminate copyright, we don't have to worry about chasing down who owns this and who owns that. Now, it sounds really stupid. Oh, just eliminate copyright. What an idiotic idea. It has nothing to do with that. Anybody who's involved in this industry understands how worthless copyright is. You go and you turn on the radio, and every single song, it sounds so similar to the last in terms of new music. Every one of them, if Drake were to sue one guy and the other guy to sue the other guy, because all their stuff is all this trap stuff, it's all identical. It's like they took a template, literally somebody like Timbaland or whoever did this, they have a template that every song is plastered with the same idea. So it's one way that copyright is obsolete. Another way was the Napster effect, where it just blew the whole thing out of the water. Another way is just the idea of copying likeness is baked into the commercial agenda, because they only want to do safe bets. So in this, we talk about another dimension to the issue of AI, which is just pay people to live and follow certain rules, kind of like we follow rules right now. And stop with this needing to chase down the dollar. It's a horrible mess right now. The whole country's in humongous debt. We're all about to go to a war, and it's to pay for debts and wars and all these other things we shouldn't have been doing. We go and we conquer all these resources because of the crazy system of keeping up with the financial system, the keeping up with all these interests and central banking and all this stuff. So that whole system is insanely erupting at all levels right now. And we're trying to square an old system of working a wage with something that, just doesn't square economically for the average person. That's why they're all in debt. They all have to work multiple jobs or have a spouse that has a job or whatever. And so if you look at something like copyright, you have to basically just make it a flat wage in particular. And then also with AI, the fear of Mexicans, the fear of invaders, the fear of many kinds of people and many kinds of things goes away when you have a system that actually produces income for people. And as long as you can do that, as long as you can do that and have the capability to sustain the system, you should do that. And you do have the capability. But they're trying to sort of run a hybrid system where they have this older way of doing things. And so they are causing this collateral damage, or this sort of innocent bystander of people who are well-intentioned in doing things the old way, while things are catastrophically changing in the new developing world. So we squash the issue of copyright. We squash the issue of AI by creating this damn guaranteed income. And I know it sounds really bad, but the stuff that you think is going to be bad, it's already worse than you think, because people really don't understand that list of like 20 things of how different the world actually is than they realize. And so when we reach those root truths, we see that there's like unnecessary harshness in society happening as a result of stringing along legacy systems and taking them seriously, when it's like you're not going to do it because the system is making you unhealthy, unwell. And so the best case scenario is to get everybody on this sort of guaranteed level of income. So what happens now is the people that say we don't want it are the people that are being run into the ground, while people who have no jobs, and the people that they point to, they have no job, they're on drugs or whatever, and they're making more money than me because they're on welfare or whatever. And that's because the system hasn't switched over properly. And a whole bunch of other reasons that are massively political about how you work the system and all this kind of stuff. But, all this stuff ultimately is addressable, but with the idea of looking at it as a root situation. But the only reason I started this stupid 16-minute video was basically to address the idea that the musician needs the art, or needs to have a discussion, needs the AI, or needs to have a discussion about, how they're going to use the AI. That's one element of this situation. But the other key element of AI is that it creates on the fly for individual consumers, which is something that has nothing to do with things that interest the artist. And in fact, if we were going to do something similar, all we would do is make one track and put about 20 different ways of combining it into the production. But it's not going to produce the same level of variety that the AI would produce. And we also illustrate, again, how worthless copyright is just by AI. Because the whole thing is, of course, trained on everything that's been copyrighted. Now, it goes on and on with copyright because ultimately it's just a scam. Copyright is not meant for the small person. It's meant for giant corporations to move vast sums of money coming from dark enterprises, cleaning it up in all these weird mechanisms, and putting out, a final clean, sanitized version. And that's how you make a billionaire. But meanwhile, really, they're secretly funded by all this other crazy stuff. So that goes to say that the things we think are the foundations are false. They're facades. And copyright hasn't helped me because it's not properly controlled by the government. And they let Napster happen. They let, AI be trained on the models. They let lots of things happen concerning, streaming platforms that shouldn't have occurred. Letting the big labels make the choices on what, the value of the artist's income should be. I mean, give me a break. And they gave the artist the shaft at every single step, because they're just looking out for another version of AI, which is the corporate model itself. And that's why it's a great example of why the power needs to be checked and then sort of utilized in its proper place. If it's going to be super efficient, okay, fine, but what about the human cost? No, we don't worry about that. Of course we got to worry about that. And so I'm kind of tired now, and I'll leave it at that. But I just wanted to get this one thing out about, how where these arguments start with AI. It's they're incredibly deep arguments that have a lot to do with, our sort of circumstance in the world. And we can't get past that it's sort of a carrot on the stick. But at the same time, we have to make do right now. So in other words, there'll be a lot more people willing to embrace it potentially if they're supported. And they're not, and so they're never going to support it. So I'll leave it at that. I said my piece on this. Have a good one.